The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 7. Part 9. Fortunately, Vanus knew the wasteland of Tripulia, the name given to the place on the outskirts of the city that was enriched by those who abandoned their magical vocation or who wanted a break from so much study. Of course, with the tolerance of the Council of Magicians in exchange for a tax. The magicians settled everything with gold. The company was quite famous, the Kendali knew it. They advanced through the busy streets of Tripulia to the north gate. There was the wasteland where a huge fair was located with multiple tents of all colors. And now at the end of summer it was the peak time of the fair, with all those new apprentices. Even people came to Tripulia from the capital of Olbiana itself to come to the fair. Almost all the fairgrounds were seasonal. In winter they used to go south, but not all of them anymore. The company of the merry actors of the wasteland had long had a fixed residence in Tripulia, although with them it was never known the same. One day they would pitch the tent and move elsewhere. At this time the fair was empty like the Bipedi premises. It was at dusk when it was at its peak. They asked 2 or 3 people and located the tent belonging to the theatre company. A brightly colored, rectangular-looking tent. The entrance was guarded by a dwarf who slept peacefully sitting on a stool. He must have been the watchman, but the stench of alcohol he gave off as he approached indicated that he was in no position to watch anything other than his own verticality. The two went inside the tent. It was a huge stage with wooden benches where the audience sat. Arian followed the Kendali, who was well acquainted with the layout of such a theatre. In the background were the dressing rooms that usually served as the actors' homes. They entered the first one they found. It was a large room full of lounge chairs and bunk beds where the actors and actresses snoozed. They were very sleepy. The night before it must have been moved. It was difficult to recognize Nilam in those conditions, but in front of them they found a beautiful half-elf standing, who looked at them with some hostility. "What do you want?" "Sorry for the intrusion. We are looking for a young man who recently joined your company in this city." "Nilam?" "No." The half-elf's tone was not good at all. "If it's my brother, please, it's urgent." "It's ogre Spawn is there." The half-elf pointed to a room separated from the rest with wooden walls. "She told me she would love me forever and now she is with that old witch." "Nilam is troll shit." The half-elf disappeared, coming out of the curtain, pushing Arian with her shoulder before the astonished gaze of the two. Arian was beginning to understand that the innkeeper's claims about his brother's lively love life were true. Without cutting a hair, the young woman opened the door without knocking. She was impatient to see her brother. She found a room decorated with some luxury. It must have been someone important within the company. In the bed there were 2 people who were lying sleeping in each other's arms. A middle-aged but very beautiful woman, with dark hair and elegant bearing. The other was a young man with tousled hair. He was a little fatter than when he lived in Caesarea, and he wore 2 gold earrings in his right ear. He had a very different image of the young apprentice who had left Caesarea almost 2 years ago. Arian couldn't contain his excitement and screamed excitedly. "Nilam? Are you okay?" The sleepers were startled at Arian's cry of joy. The woman looked at the 2 strangers in surprise but immediately reacted angrily against Nilam. "Shameless! That you'd never fool me again. You're a liar." The cake on Nilam's face was heard from outside the room. The young man couldn't react. As the woman had barely opened her eyes, she was indignantly leaving the room with a robe on without paying attention to the 2 girls. "Old witch, get out of here. You'll come back like you all do. Besides, Madame Leonore is coming back from her trip today, and I don't need you anymore." Nilam went back to sleep. Arian was surprised. Her brother had not 2 lovers but 3. In Caesarea her brother had never behaved like that, at least that she knew. Nilam wakes up at once. Arian was angry with her brother. He opened his eyes to close them again and then opened them wide. Now he had recognized the stranger who called him. "Arian. My girl. What are you doing here?" Her brother was glad to see her, quickly got out of bed and hugged his sister. They continued to hug each other for a few minutes while the Kendali was a spectator of the scene. Nilam, you're fine. I was very worried about you, thank the gods nothing has happened to you. Arian was crying with emotion, he had gone through so much hardship to get to this moment. Little sister, what are you doing here? Has something happened in Caesarea? Is Master Loaf okay? Loaf has disappeared. Some magicians came asking for him, they said I had stolen something, they tried to interrogate me to betray you. Betray me? Nilam exclaimed. Loaf gave you a jewel just before you left Caesarea, the mags are looking for that jewel, white robes. A jewel? Nilam didn't seem to understand his sister. If a piece of jewelry emits a blue glow, remember. Loaf told you that it was very valuable, that you only sell it in case of dire need. A blue jewel, don't worry, I've already sold it. So don't worry. You sold it. Arian was paralyzed, she had risked everything for that jewel to be sold as a vulgar trinket, she pushed her brother away angrily. You sold it. Tripulia was not what I expected, sister. Loaf's letter was a failure, I managed to get into the Magic Academy of the Order of the Purple Brothers. It's not one of the most important orders, but its teachings were very hard, very hard. We had to learn hundreds of phrases every day, and I had to work until the wee hours of the morning in that filthy slum in Bipedi. Nilam lay down on the bed and Arian stroked her hair tenderly. After 2 months I realized that magic was too hard, so ungrateful, that I gave it up. Tripulia has so many things to see and do. After a few months I abandoned Bipedi and so did his complaints and expletives. I tasted all the pleasures and realized that acting is the most important thing of all. But this life has expenses, a lot of expenses to ingratiate myself with my actor brothers, and for them to accept me you have to spend a lot of gold. I sold the jewel in the first few months so I could live in a decent way. But magic is not sister life. When you see those magicians are bitter, when the theatre gives you a much more real vision of life and with fewer sacrifices. Haven't you had any problems with the white robes? Those stiff people, they didn't even let me go near their tower to submit an application for admission, they said I wasn't dignified. There are too many apprentices in Tripulia and I dropped out of school, I'm nobody for them. But they said they knew you. I've never spoken in a white robe. Sister, I'm fine. Come back to see me tomorrow and I'll invite you to lunch, then you'll be a spectator of our special function. Madame Leonore comes back today. She's the owner of the company and she wants me to be her lead actor. Arian was furious, all sacrifices were in vain, Nilam is unconscious, he had sold the jewel at the first opportunity. She left the room crying accompanied by the Kendali. Nilam was lying down. His sister was here for the jewel, no doubt it was very valuable then, she had to ask for more gold, much more. He loved his sister but it was necessary to deceive her. Just now she had to show up. Tonight, when Nilam would close a deal that would make him incredibly rich. With that gold, his sister would surely forgive him, and then they would travel together all over Shanaris. The young man got up and went to a trunk at the back of the room, removed the magic padlock that could only be opened with the touch of his hand. Inside there was only one thing, the only thing he hadn't sold since his arrival in Tripulia. He was still inside the leather sack Loaf had given him. Nilam pulled the jewel out of it, and it emitted a faint blue glow. Nilam was also not honest with Arian on another matter, the buyer of his jewel was a white robe, perhaps it was too many coincidences. Perhaps his sister was right that he was in danger, but a chest full of gold coins was too tempting for him. In addition, the white robe was recommended by a friend of his, a friendship forged in the underbelly of the City of Magic. Arian took a long walk through the city of Tripulia with the Kendali who accompanied her in silence. The disappointment was so great, sold like a vulgar tomato at the first sign of change, to stop being a magician for a simple actor with the amount of sacrifices made by the humble people of Caesarea to finance the trip. Well, Maybe it would be better that way. With the jewel lost in any place from 3 to 4, now for the white robes it would be almost impossible to find it.